Namaskar, good evening, and welcome to Wednesday Wisdom webinar at the Bombay Management Association. It is a very unique and proud moment for me to welcome in our midst Dr. P.V. Ramana, a management thinker par excellence and the founder of the ITM group of institutions. It's very rare that one gets the privilege to introduce someone who could be rightly referred as his leader. I work with the ITM group, as most of you know, and we look up to Ramana sir as our leader, mentor, coach, and guide. I'm refraining from using the word boss because I've never known him to boss over everybody or anybody at any given point in time. Dr. Ramana is, of course, an engineer by profession, went on to do his management in the United States, served on the boards of several large organizations as CEO, including the TTK Group, the Aditya Birla Group, Grasim. Before, in the year 1991, he gave birth to the ITM group of institutions. In its 30th year, ITM is located as a reputed institute of higher education across 12 locations in the country, running two universities in Raipur and Baroda, and having its flagship campus in Mumbai at the ITM Business School. In the year 1998-99, Dr. Ramana was the president of the Bombay Management Association, and I'm sure our colleagues from the presidential team, including Indrapalji, Ernest Fernandez, will remember the wonderful times that all of us had together under his presidency, organizing several large conventions for the Bombay Management Association. Dr. Ramana is very passionate about educating the girl child and runs and supports several institutions to educate the girl child all over the country. He's also very fond of music and is trying to ensure that the ancient Indian heritage of music is well protected in this digital age. Last but not the least, he supports a lot of ventures in the field of eye care because he believes that in a country like India, a lot of young children are not able to complete their education because of defects in the eye as they might emerge due to malnutrition. With that backdrop, I am delighted to welcome you, sir. Namaste. Welcome to the Bombay Management Platform again. I would call it Ghar Vapsi for you after about 20 years in one sense.
Right.
And I request you to enlighten us on this wonderful team that you suggested is what's happening to the MBA. How have been the changes in recent times, and how should one ensure that the MBA degree is still a passport to career success? Over to you, Ramana sir.
Welcome, friends. You would see that Mani sir, I am not seeing my own picture on the screen. How do I do that? So I don't need to.
So we are able to see you, sir. Nothing
Okay,
to worry.
that's
Anyway, I'll
fine.
show it to you now.
That's
okay?
fine. That's fine. Okay, carry on. Friends, I suppose a number of past presidents are also in the audience today. I welcome all of you to this talk. Indrapalji, namaskar. And Ernest, wonderful to see you, sir. Okay. I pardon me for the little lower light in my room because I never ever wanted limelight, and probably this is one of the signals of that kind of a nature. The title is a practical philosophy for young people, managers, MBA, one is anybody. I am just not going to say even one word about MBA or management in my talk. What I am interested to convey is that every person, when starting out in life, has to develop a code for himself. I call it a personal philosophy. This is what I will do, and this is what I will not do under any circumstances. This kind of self-set principles will lead on to success, provided that you understand at each stage that what is happening to you and what is happening to those people around you, and behave accordingly. At the end of the lecture, some listeners might ask me, have you been practicing this? Yes, 80-90% of the time. But I learned because of the mistakes I have made. Therefore, I can't honestly say, since the first time I started working nearly 60 years ago in 1961, have I been following the same things? No. If there is one or two or three successes in my life, the rest 97 have been failures. I learned from those failures, built up my code, and came to be where I am today, mainly because of all the people around me. And this talk mainly deals with you and the people around you. As simple as that. Let us start at the very beginning. As a young man, you graduate BA, BCom, engineer, MBA. You enter a job world. Some unfortunate company is fortunate enough to hire you as an intern, and you join in your first job. What do? You are drowned in information, isn't it? Whether you like it or not, you open a paper. These days, you don't open a paper, you open any screen, anywhere, any website, any podcast, any YouTube channel is just pouring out information on your head. You are practically drowned in information. Why has the company hired you? Because they want you to do something with this information. As simple as that. That is the first job you will ever get. Information is thrown at you and you have to do something with it. What the company or the employer or your colleague or your superior is expecting you to do is that you make that information useful either to you or to somebody else. Usually, when you make it useful to you, then you can make it useful to others. Okay? If that is the case, what is happening there? What happens to the information which has been made useful? I prefer to call it knowledge. Knowledge has many definitions: understanding, awareness, accumulated knowledge, scriptural knowledge, book knowledge, technical knowledge. But I would like to give it an overall impression that knowledge is something that you can collect information, data, facts, analyze them, and make it useful. I'll give a small illustration to let you know what I mean to say by smallest. When in 1960s, 63, 64, like that, when I had my first child, I was walking him along the street, and we come to a crossroads, and there are these three funny lights: red, yellow, and green. My son is asking, Daddy, what are those wonderful lights? Can we take them home? Can I play with me? He's 2 years old. He has the same information as I have. He thinks it is a toy. I say, no, you have to make it useful for you. If you see a red light, you stop. If you see a green light, you can walk. If it is amber, even then you stop. You don't run. This is the smallest trivial example of making information useful and making it knowledge. How do you convey this knowledge to others? You have to train them, you have to skill them, you have to tell them something that they do not know, preferably by example, by doing it yourself. And then you start to see that teams are forming around you. Nobody has assigned them. People come to you and ask, hey, Mani sir, what to do with this? And you tell them, I think if you do like this, you will succeed. Or let us make this trial. Why do they come to you? Because you've gone through steps 1 and 2. You gathered information, you analyzed it, and you made it useful. And people are looking for that usefulness of information, the knowledge component that you alone can derive, and the knowledge you take out of the same set of facts, same set of half information, uncertainties, rumors, whole thing is somehow different from what somebody else can derive from the same information. Once that is done, you become a natural leader of that small group of people who are hovering around you, or asking you for information, or decision, or data, or a direction. And the top management he is going to look at you and say, hey, this guy is a team leader. Should we then bump him up a bit and make him a leader of this small team? That's when you get your very first promotion and recognition for possessing that small extra bit of knowledge. Or
We are in boss's webinar, you forgot.
okay,
Okay.
who is talking? Okay. Uh, then this ability to guide teams opens further doors to you. But we are stuck at this knowledge thing. What does knowledge do? Knowledge makes you take action. Otherwise, knowledge sitting in a book or sitting in your head or sitting in a gossip or sitting in the canteen is useless. Either you or your team or somebody who reports to you, knowledge drives them to action. And action is all important. Knowledge's second definition is that which leads you to take action. Suppose you had no knowledge whatsoever, you are stuck in the same place. You don't move forward. There is no light, there is no road, there is no direction, there is no signal. If knowledge is impelling you to take action, you take it almost immediately. Then the second question that comes in is, all actions have consequences, isn't it? They are good, they are bad. You can't even predict them all the time. Why do so many companies, so many teams, so many projects fail? Is that we are forced to act under imperfect information, therefore imperfect knowledge. But we have to act in any case, otherwise the world will pass by. Look at, just as a very great example, look at people like our Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji. The actions he takes, the pandemic or Maharashtra government, should they impose a lockdown and kill the economy, or they open up as they are doing and kill the people? What a decision to make. But if you don't make the decision at all, instead of 2% of the people dying, you have 14% death rate and you have 500,000 deaths like in USA. Who will bear the burden for that? Therefore, you let us go back and count all the way again. Gather information, develop knowledge, make it useful to others, and act on the knowledge that you gained in the process. And take responsibility for the actions that you have taken. Here, let us sit back a bit and say that there is an external element here called attitude. There are right attitudes and negative, or positive attitudes and negative attitudes. Most usually, actions taken with the positive attitude will lead to positive consequences. They can be 10%, they can be 90% right, but they will be on the right side of the spectrum that you are aiming at. But if you have negative attitude, then everything is destroyed. Again, a very small example. You are a student, you are friendly, but half friendly with somebody because you are both dating the same girl, maybe, and you feel negatively towards your friend on that day. And Professor Mani has just announced a surprise midterm exam next day morning. And your friend is not there to hear Professor Mani speak about this. So would you tell your friend that there is an exam tomorrow, you better study, my dear? Or you ignore him and say, let him suffer? A small negative attitude will prevent you from taking the right action, and the consequence is almost always negative, 100% negative. On the positive side, there is a possibility 10 to 90% being successful and positive and right. On the negative side, it is always 100% negative. Therefore, let us go back and reconstruct our personal philosophy all over again. You gather information, analyze it, make it useful, develop knowledge, develop skill sets, therefore take leadership position. And since that knowledge enables you to take action and you have the right attitude, you take right actions, and therefore the team that you built is progressing. Then somebody, let us say in the company when you joined, has allotted your cabin in the basement, and you have somehow come up to the ground floor and then the first floor. Then you find that this wonderful many-storied building that your company is, there are no lifts in the first floor. You can't even see a staircase. I said, how are the people going up there? There must be managers, AGMs, general managers, associate presidents, vice president, executive vice presidents, and yeah, if you leave a HR person, he will construct a infinity number hierarchy. Okay, all those floors are there. How do you get there? So you gather an old man, somehow shuffling along, and say, "Hey, I want to go to the second floor. Where are the stairs?" That fellow turns and looks back at you and asks one question: are you responsible? That is a wonderful question, and wonderful question to be able to answer. Yes, go through the chain again. I am the informed person. I can analyze data. I can build knowledge. I can train others. I can lead them. I can take action based on the knowledge set that we have developed. I am taken the action, therefore I am responsible. For what? Responsible for your own actions, your team's actions, and possibly the actions of all those around you whom your actions impact. That includes your boss, your subordinates, of course, and your peers. Why? And you have to ask this question: who is the most important person for your boss? Not his boss. You are the most important person for your boss, because his performance, his track record, and his progress in the company depends on what his team does. And you are an important part of his team. Therefore, if you are not working responsibly, with the right attitude, and with maximum amount of knowledge that the circumstances allow you to do, then you are destroying his career too. Therefore, you should be able to say, the day you are able to say, I am alone, I alone am responsible for everything that I do, my team does, and what happens around me wherever I am. Maybe you are in the lift, you are in the canteen, you are in the reception, you are in somebody else's premises, you are in a party, you are at home, you are at work, you are at a sales meeting. Can you consider yourself that you alone are responsible? If you do that, then magically the personal lift to the second floor opens up right before your eyes. That's where you can say that you climbed one step. And are we talking any management here? No. We are saying this is what happens everywhere. It has happened 10,000 years ago. It will happen 10,000 years hence also. There will always be information. It will be imprecise and imperfect. You have to analyze, develop knowledge sets, skill sets, train your team, learn your team, develop your team, be its leader, take actions, take right actions because you have the right attitude, and therefore be totally responsible. This is a timeless process. And if you recognize it and implant it within yourself, you would have done a great job for yourself. Then the question, you are still struggling there. You achieved 2 or 3 levels of success and you are still struggling to get ahead. And once again, usually the old people whom the company seems to have passed or passed over them, and they are still hanging around because of a sense of intense loyalty or because of their nowhere else to go. They are always a fountain of information and usually a fountain of knowledge also. So you accost one of them and ask, hey, I'm stuck here. What is next? And he will take you, chalo canteen mein ek chai pee lete hain. And he takes you and engages you in conversation. Then in all this he comes, yeah, I think that what is missing is, he asks you, Are you capable of sacrifice? Then you are taken aback. What is it I am sacrificing? I worked very hard. I made assistant vice president. I am taking home 20 lakhs a year. I got married. I am in loan for my car and my house and my furniture and my holidays. I am paying EMIs left and right. What is it I can sacrifice? The old man tells you, my dear boy, you have to sacrifice the fruits of your success, the fruit of your effort. You have to be able to say to anyone that this I didn't do this. It is my team. It is this boy, this young recruit, this team member, this marketing whiz, this analytical guy, this digital marketing guy. We have been able to see new tracks and we have conquered new markets. But it is these people who have done it. I have just allowed them to do it. It is that sense of giving away consciously all benefits, recognition, even promotion, and allow you to be passed over if the company would want to do so. That makes you the beginnings of leadership in any situation, even society or in family or in a workplace or in a collegial place like a club or a team or a sport, wherever. Can you just and work hard at it and the success and then give it away happily and smilingly? That question is a real question for you, which will make the beginnings of leadership from apprenticeship to a trained worker to a managerial role. You are beginning to assume leadership roles if you can put this element into you. ये हम मैं त्याग कर सकता हूँ क्या? Can I give it away? It's a very difficult question to answer. Many people fumble here. In the effort of gathering all the glory, they destroy the teams and eventually they destroy companies themselves. What they have built, they will destroy because their ego will not allow them to give credit to others or even promote others as their equals or even as their superiors. Please mind this. This is one of the most difficult, what you call a crush points in a journey towards total leadership of companies. I have failed many times. I have also succeeded many times. And this is what I have learned in my life. Then the board meets and say who's the next level of vice presidents, because usually the VPs from among that small group, the CEO will emerge at some point or other. And some wise guy in the board says, I have been observing this guy, and he recounts your abilities, not in terms of marketing statistics or production statistics or profit figures or whatever. He recounts what you can do in these terms. This guy can gather information, he can analyze it, he can develop knowledge, he can develop that knowledge and make it useful for our company and for his teams. He has done it in manufacturing, he has done it in marketing, he has done it in product development. I think this is the guy. And I often notice that he's not pushy, he doesn't put himself forward and he gives away success to his team members. We need that kind of people because that is our culture. And therefore, you get promoted to be a vice president. Where is the next level in your life or them? This is extremely difficult. And I don't mind confessing that at this level, I often failed many, many times. And this question is very important question. Eventually, usually they have wise old people or external eminent people or some hotshots in the board only for this purpose. Their job is to talk to all these young hopefuls and assess them. And one of them offers you a 12-year-old Glenley and takes you in a corner and asks this question. Hey Ramana, can you tell the truth at all times? Can you tell the truth at all times, at all places? The absolute unvarnished truth, because that is what the board needs to know. Nobody who reports to the board can hide even one item of information. Are you capable of doing that? that is extremely, extremely difficult to my own, what you call demerit or some backward steps in my career. I could not take the courage to do this till since I was middle ages in the company. Often, one way of telling a lie is you don't tell the truth. You are not told a lie either. It's called deferred truth. Deferred truth is always a lie. You defer the truth thinking that you are protecting somebody. You are protecting somebody's sensibilities, or in the hope that thing will correct itself. Why should I destroy somebody's career or kill a product or remove an area of marketing just because that is the truth? Can I give it some more time? When you are able to do this, then you will become a CEO, you will become a managing director, you will become a board chairman. You become capable of creating projects and corporations just by merely wishing it. Why? Let us see what is our code of conduct is. A personal code which drives work and which drives relationships and which drives emotions. You are always aware. Never stop being aware. That being aware allows information to flow to you. Construct your filters for the information. What this fellow says is true, what that fellow says is half true, and if this fellow says something, I will believe it with my heart. Construct your sets of filters. Allow information to come to you, analyze it, make it your knowledge, and let that knowledge drive you to improve yourself because you have made it useful for you, and improve others because you have made it useful for others. That makes you beginnings of managerial activity. Then we learn to take right actions with right attitudes, your success rate goes up. Why? Because more people cooperate with you because you know that your heart is in the right place. And even more people will want to work with you because you do take responsibility. And eventually, you sacrifice your success for others' sake and say that he did it, I didn't do it. Then more and more people will gather around you because they are damn sure that even if they contribute 10% towards the effort, they may get 50% of the recognition. That is the greatest gift a manager can give to a subordinate or a colleague or even his own boss. And it is these unearned gifts that you are given that drive the company forward. It creates many teams. If you can create in your image just one or two more people in a 20-year career, you improve the company's fortunes 10 times, 100 times. Because you have created the future leaders, and the company does not have to look elsewhere and say that what will happen to me. Eventually, when you are able to tell the truth to your board, to your senior colleagues, and in the board meetings or AGMs or strategy meetings, then the company can take the right path forward. The society can take the right path forward. Your own family can take the right path forward if you are in a position to be able to understand the truth and be able to act on it. This is such a simple, total philosophy that this has served me all through my life. Except perhaps at home or in family situations, to tell the truth at all times is extremely difficult. I am in the last stages of my life, I am coming to grips with that. Because when you build a family, the family is building itself when you are building your company. And sometimes there is a disconnect between what is happening at home and what is happening at work. Can you be the same person? It is very difficult questions. But these questions can always be answered if you keep one set of principles alive throughout your entire life. I think I have said rather more than what is required, and I would like to end here because this is not a management lesson. This is a personal lesson. This is from what my own experience, and this kind of a structuring of my thought process has led me to a leadership position in at least 3 organizations, in TTK, in Grasim, and in my own company. Even if I am the founder of my company, if I did not fulfill this criteria, the life or competition or society or the regulators would have thrown me out long ago. Am I right, Mani sir? Thank you one and all for listening to me patiently. I think I have spent my 35 minutes.
Thank you very much, sir. That was very inspiring. And I'm going to take the liberty of trying to summarize certain key lessons that one picked up from your sharing of wisdom, particularly because some people joined in a little late. And I thought we'd set the context before we invite questions from the participants.
Okay.
One of the first things that Dr. Ramana emphasized was trying to understand the major difference between information and knowledge and the place that each one of this has in a corporate setting or an academic setting. The second message was the importance of positivity in the workplace as against being negative in the workplace, whether it be dealing with individuals, teams, corporations, colleagues, as the case might be. The most interesting thing that Sir spoke about was the fact that failure should be considered as part of the work process. Failure is an event, failure is not a person. And I think this is something very, very important that one should try to inculcate in one's work ethic. Last but not the least, do I have the temperament? Do I have the courage? And do I have the entire desire to help others become successful? Very often, we are so worried about our successes that we are not concerned about what happens to others around us. And very often, we get totally focused only on ourselves. Some wonderful pearls of wisdom, sir. Sir was mentioning that this has come out of his long drawn experience. We always believe that he's batting strong at 80 plus, and we look forward to some such wisdom from him time and again. Sir, I must tell you that there are already questions in the chat box. If you permit, I'd like to bring these questions to your notice so that we can engage in a discussion for some time. The first question I have is, Dr. Ramana, would you tell us the difference between leadership style in a corporate versus leadership styles in academics? Are they the same or are there differences?
I believe the word itself, leadership style, is a buzzword. It doesn't have any meaning whatsoever, because the acts of leadership that you exhibit are individual, and at each crisis moment, each decision point, each pivotal point in a corporation, or for that matter, or a family, or a personal career. There are 3 examples. They are all the same. They are not different. Leadership style is a consult speak.
Okay, I understand. In the same context, we've always said that a great leader produces further leaders. How does one develop that temperament that I am ready to produce more leaders? Because conventionally, a leader believes that he's successful only if he has ample followers.
No, I think that this is an quality that is not a leadership quality, it is a human quality. My first work spot was in Bombay, was in air conditioning field. And I think I worked from 1962 to 1967 in the field of air conditioning. All those fellows, gentlemen today, there was a time in the 80s where every single CEO of the air conditioning industry in India had worked with me or had worked under me in the 60s. How do you do that? By passing on knowledge, by passing on a way of thinking, and by passing on a way of making decisions. You are not passing on technical knowledge, and for God's sake, we are not passing on what you call quote unquote management knowledge. That is also a buzzword. Because probably a housewife with a husband and a brother-in-law and 3 children sending to school and managing a house does more quote unquote managerial work than her husband ever does in the office. I firmly believe that, right? And she has to deal with at least 8 or 10 people who are full of ego and full of instant demands for service. In a company, that instant demand for service doesn't happen. A boss always can tell, they come tomorrow, or I will see this paper next week. No, this doesn't happen. So I think that it is not, to answer your question very simply, leadership action, that means exhibiting quality of leadership in the words that you utter and the actions you take can be exhibited right from kindergarten till the day you pass off. And there is nothing corporate about that. Nothing corporate about that. We are only in a corporate setting, therefore we give such a weight to what we call a leadership style. No. I strongly believe, okay, because as a person who has seen me for well over 30-35 years, has my speech or way of behavior has changed from the day where we were a loss-making 10 lakhs turnover company in 1991 till today? I am the same person. There is nothing leadership.
Absolutely. So I guess the moral of the story is, do you walk the talk, as they say in jargon, in the simplest of words?
No, definitely, because that is implied in my structure, isn't it? Because when you hold yourself
Absolutely.
responsible for all your actions and those of your people around you and people who may be impacted by your actions, for them also you alone are responsible. There is no question of walking the talk. Never talk, just walk.
So that's an extension learning for today. I'm going to hand over to Indrapal Singh ji, who of course you know well and have interacted with. He wishes to make an observation.
Sure.
Over to you, Indrapal ji. Sir, unmute please. Indrapal ji, unmute please.
Yes. I have done. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are able to hear you.
Perfect,
Professor
sir. Go
Ramana.
ahead, sir.
No, I think, Professor Ramana, you made a very, very interesting case for personal philosophy. I think most of the time we lead our lives by somebody else's philosophies, somebody others, something we might have read, we might have heard, or imbibed from somewhere. But I think it will take a great deal of discipline to create your own code of conduct. And as you said, that if you're true to your own code of conduct, which is based on some sound principles of maybe our culture and our own shastras, if you may say, then you're bound to succeed, and you're bound to remain steady, like you said, able to withstand all the ups and downs of failures and what have you, because you are finally yourself responsible. The point that you made about ability to give it away is a wonderful way to develop people. I mean, if you keep on taking away the credit, how are they ever going to develop? So I think in the case of personal philosophy you shared with us, I think all the leadership qualities that we read about in management books and elsewhere are summarized into that. This is the essence of leadership. And if you want to succeed in life, I suppose, if you develop such a leadership, whether then you are in a government sector or non-business, business, or wherever you are, you're bound to be successful. So I would thank you very much for sharing this wonderful, nugget of wisdom. And it would be worthwhile trying to understand what our philosophies are today and how we should probably change them or modify them to come closer to the code of conduct that you described for us. Thank you so much, Professor Ramana, for taking this time for us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Indrapalji. You always had a kind word for me.
So I move on to the next question is, would you prescribe based on your experience, what is the healthy ratio between IQ and EQ for career success?
And I really don't differentiate this what so-called EQ and IQ. One of the things, maybe it is perhaps a weakness as far as modern management theory goes. I have never fallen prey to any of this pass by fads, whatever buzzwords. Because if you think at least 50%, for my practical philosophy code, which I've enunciated, I can say that depending on the time and place, I practice it between 50% to 95%. In that practice, I have never found any reason. You have to deal socially and with your peers, and you are supposed to be somehow develop an emotional quotient. So to develop empathy, I know all these words. To be receptive, to develop empathy, to be understanding, to be able to share their space, and all those fun words. They are summarized in one word in what I say. Do you have the right attitude? What is the rightness of the attitude? Right? If you can remove the negative thoughts about people, you have said something. Failure is not a person. That is a great sentence, Mani sir. When in families, in social circumstances, in politics, in corporations, when there is a failure, everybody tries to find one person who is responsible for that failure. Right? If you think that failure is not a person at all, it is a set of circumstances which you have not been able to analyze. You have not been able to develop knowledge about that. You have not found the solution. You have not found the action set. Even if you had the action set, you didn't have the attitude to carry it through. Therefore, you and your team have failed. There is no one else in the outside world. Okay. I take great pride in saying just
Right,
one
sir.
thing in my life. I have never held anyone else outside of me as responsible for my failure. I am alone are responsible for the failure. It is the reverse of that sacrifice part. If you are able to give away your success, what is the sauda there? What is the trade-off? You have to take all the failures, isn't it? So you don't look at an external
Absolutely.
person or a circumstance or a product or a market for your failure. If you develop that and you're able to, you have to require a lot of resiliency to be able to say that I am alone or responsible, I have failed, I accept. But once you do that, what a sense of relief your team gets. You got a big umbrella for them, isn't it? They never get wet,
Absolutely.
right? That, and in a rain, where do the people gather? Under the umbrella. Right?
And I guess when you're holding the umbrella, the confidence of the team in the leader multiplies significantly.
Absolutely.
Great. So the next interesting question is, as a leader, when the entire failure processes continue, people in the organization tend to become very negative. How do you convert all this negativity into positivity?
It doesn't happen overnight. You have to work very hard at changing the circumstances which have led to that critical stage, because people don't become negative just because they like being negative. The workflow is not good, the success rate is fallen, the markets are not responding, your product is not selling. Whom do they blame? That's where the negative feeling set starts, in either at the top or in the middle or at the bottom. If you are the leader responsible for that, then you have to work at changing those circumstances. And you have to be seen as being very sincere, hardworking, and truthful in the efforts that you do and you demand others do to change those circumstances. Then that is a slow process of changing the negativity in the team, in the company. It does not happen overnight. Why negativity happens? Because the leaders have not exhibited these two qualities. If the leader concerned in that company had always taken the blame himself, who else will have a negative feeling? You've been throwing the blame around like confetti. Everybody has a negative feeling. हमने इतना काम किया, boss sees what happens. When something happens, he fires this man. He doesn't deserve to be fired. The boss deserves to be fired. That's the negative feeling. But if you accepted the blame yourself, who is going to fire you? No. What I am saying is both strategic, tactful, and company saving at the same time.
Noted, sir. I'll now pass on to Ernest Fernandez, sir. Ernest, over to you.
Thank you, Professor
Mr.
Mani.
Fernandez?
Yes.
Hi, Ernest. How are you?
Oh, hello, Dr. Ramana. Dr. Ramana, you've been a great achiever. You have achieved great results in companies as president. And then you built an educational empire. Did you find that in your personal philosophy, you could imbue your staff as an entrepreneur, and your personal philosophy would have played a big role in what you have done as an entrepreneur, building up ITM? But could you have done the same thing in a company? Because in a company, your personal philosophy has got to match with the company's philosophy.
Ernest and other members who are listening to me, I think I've been lucky enough to persuade all those people around me that my way is a good way, because, and they find it convenient to believe me because of another reason. This fellow is accepting all the blame. I am saying this project, this is the way it should be done. If it fails, don't worry, I am to blame. And I show it in action. Right? Just to indicate one historical fact, which is undeniable by anybody. High-tech carbon is a thundering success story in India. The roots for that were laid in Egypt by me in a company called Alexandria Carbon. We learned the technology, we developed the team, we assimilated the products and brought it as a made cooked product to India. Anyone connects Dr. P.V. Ramana with carbon black industry? Never. Never ever.
No.
The true leader is difficult to find. That was the reason, if Professor Mani can look back, for the first 10 years of ITM, no one knew who founded ITM. Because we never put founder, chairman, nothing was there. Probably people knew only Dr. Harsalekar, who is the director, or Dr. J.D. Mehta and others. Nobody ever knew me. Are you capable of doing that? Therefore, to answer Ernest's question, yes, it is possible to do so, provided you do so by example, not by preaching. In TTK, when I joined one of my early jobs, within a span of some 5.5 years, from 1979 to mid-84, a company 70 crore group, TTK group as a whole, losing 3 crores a year, developed to be 350 crores with 16 crore net in 5.5 years in that period, 1979-84. Has anyone associated the resurgence of TTK with Dr. Ramana? Of course, I was just plain, not even professor, just plain Mr. Ramana. You build companies, you build people, but you have to be essentially unknown to be able to do that time and again. This is what I believe. But there are other people who want to, even a 1% success, 100% credit. Okay. But that also works, because in a large growing company with hundreds of thousands of people and at least 1,000 vice presidents, you can get away. But not when you are leading a small company or leading your own company. You can't get away. The failure is your own, success is others. That is a firm philosophy.
Right, sir. That's a very profound point being re-emphasized once again in a different way. I'll move on to the next question, where the question reads as follows. We have been always told that work hard towards success. In today's world, we hear work smart towards success. What would your views be based on your rich experience?
This work smart towards success has a element of jugaad in it. What do you call street smarts? What do you call working smart? To what you call the tune the system to your advantage, to find the loophole, or to find that one element in the customs code which enables you to import to DMT at 0% duty where your competitor is forced to pay 100% duty. Is that working smart? Working digital smart? No. I find one again that buzzword which is going to disappear very soon. There is nothing like working smart. Systems are smart and you work with systems, right? But all systems, smart systems or dumb systems, want you to take a decision. And this decision is almost always with imperfect 50-50 knowledge. Can you take the decision and lead your team along? It is not working smart, it is not working dumb, it is not old fashioned, it is not new fashioned. I believe that the principle that I adopted and I want to preach are timeless. What happens is, if you are able to take decisions and be responsible, that becomes a habit. And what people take, say, a week to take 10 decisions, you take half an hour to take those 10 decisions. Therefore, you've got all the time in the world to reflect on the really, really difficult and long-term problems. Okay. So my definition of working smart is not that conventionally known today's street sense of working smart. No. Work fast, work disciplined, save time for your really difficult activity. We take pride, isn't it, that we answer mails within 5 minutes. There is no committee meeting, there is no brainstorming, there is no big conversations. We consult a few people and take action.
Right, sir. The next question is requesting you to do a little bit of crystal gazing based on all your rich experience. What do you predict is going to be the future of work going ahead?
Work will
workplaces?
always remain work. Where the work happens will change. It changes in different directions. Your one prediction is you're always working. There is no work time and a personal time and home time anymore. Why? Because you are carrying your smartphone, which is really a hardworking computer, along with you. It makes you work all the time. And you dare not shut it off. I don't think is there anybody in this 100+ audience who will switch off his phone even for half an hour. Right? Therefore, you work in spurts. Reading a spreadsheet, taking an action, sending along a message, and listening to an old song from paying guests all happens at the same time. That's the future of work. And if you want to know really the future of work in a manufacturing situation, you have to see a difficult video to catch, but it is on the net. It is how the Tesla cars are assembled in their California factory. Even the workers are sitting on robotic arms. They have a space for their personal phone, their personal walkie-talkie, personal music instrument. And the robotic arm is taking them to the workplace, and the fellow is working, fixing the panel while listening to his favorite music. That's an amazing piece of automation. And freedom of work, or the freedom to pursue. You like to listen to music while you're working? Yes, we'll allow you to do that. So since you don't fall down somewhere while working, walking from one place to another, the robotic arm has a nice comfy chair in which he sits, and that arm is taking you from one place to the other where you're supposed to do your work as per a list. Amazing, amazing piece. That is, they're already in what you call industry 5.0, not 4.0 anymore, where the factory is welcoming the worker like an honored guest. It is not a drudgery to go there. That's the future of work.
It's almost like someone had said, are you working from home or are you living at work? And I think you
So
have
both-
distinguished this.
This time and place distinction between home and work and leisure is going to disappear in a good way. Absolutely in a good way. Because most of the analysis would be done by machines before you look at the data.
Wonderful, sir. I really appreciate all the time that you spent. And as you mentioned in passing, we had a record number of 136 participants coming in from different parts of the country, from industry, from academia. And as you mentioned, some people from different parts of the globe. We were indeed very, very happy to receive what we call this personal wisdom for you. Someone has remarked in the chat box that it was a refreshing change that we didn't hear some Western management theories, but learned something which you have inculcated, which you have practiced, and today are in a position to share with so much conviction. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this wonderful session. As we always do, we respect everybody's time. You're welcome to connect with Dr. Ramana offline also. And you can see the YouTube video later on once it is hosted on the BMA YouTube channel. I'm now going to request my colleague on the executive committee, Jagmohan Rishi, to do a wrap up and also present a vote of thanks on behalf of BMA. Jagmohan, as many of you know, he leads digital and learning and organization development for Wockhardt Limited. Over to you, Jagmohan.
Thank you very much, Professor Mani. And it is a great privilege to give my vote of thanks to Professor Ramana. I think, sir, I would say that this particular 1 hour session was a master class, a mini MBA for the young leaders like us. And it gives an insight that there's so much here within Indian leaders and thought leaders that, people unnecessarily run towards the Western side. Only thing is that the Westerners, they have collated the knowledge from us and put it into theories and sold it back to us. So I would so and we learn in the MBA schools and those things. When I was going through your sessions, and I was remembering two aspects. One was I was remembering President Abdul Kalam, that when and his book Wings of Fire, where he was talking about that you don't have to be talking about yourself in any kind of institution. You have to walk the talk as a leader. And wherein he gave an example that when there was a failure, the leader took the blame, and when there was a success, the leader told me to go forward. I think that's exactly you have been.
Okay. Can I make one point here, since you have taken his name, Jagmohan?
Yes, sir.
Several years ago, when he was president, he called for a meeting in which, as my position of in ITM, I was also invited to Vigyan Bhavan. All the directors and vice chancellors of public universities, IITs, IIMs, all the #1 institutions were present there. And President Kalam told that audience that, guys, please remember that India is being built by engineers and managers from 2nd tier and 3rd tier and 4th tier institutions in India, not the 1st tier institutions. And you still have to learn that how to shift the focus from building an individual career to building a nation.
Absolutely, sir. I mean, hats off.
That I remember him for saying that.
Yes, I totally agree. Because I mean, the real gold or real wealth is in the rural area, and not only the urban areas, of course. So coming back to, I think I've jotted down some of the points which you mentioned, sir, trying to understand the difference between information and knowledge. And that's exactly what we were discussing in yesterday's strategy meeting, that there's a lot of information lying around, but what is the knowledge or analytics which we can work upon? And of course, very, very important is that failure. I think this I learned in the theory, but in the reality, it is there in the leaders over here, that failure is not about a person, it is about the event which is won. So don't blame anybody as a failure, that this person is a failure or this person is success. So it is the event which has failed, not the person which has failed, I think. And very, very important is that the young leaders need to have a temperament to make others successful. In fact, I'm hearing this statement second time, few days back. I think Professor Mani arranged for a lecture by Thyrocare,
Dr. Velumani.
Professor Velumani, Mr. Dr. Velumani. He talked the same thing only. जो जीतता है वो जीतता है, जो जिताता है वो सब हमेशा जिताता है, हमेशा जीतता है. So as a leader, we need to have sensibilities and at the same time the personal code of conduct, always being aware, and of course construct filters to filter the information accordingly. I think it is a mini MBA. I would love to hear. We would love to hear you again and again, sir. Thank you very much for all the wisdom which you have shared with us. It's your personal wisdom. Once again, great, sir. On behalf of BMA, we really thank you for your time and wisdom, sir.
Thank you from my side too as well.
Over to you,
Thanks,
Professor Mani.
Jagmohan. I think you aptly summarized it. Yeah, thanks. You summarized it very aptly. Now comes the moment that we always look forward to, is to have a group photograph with the distinguished speaker. Can I request everybody to put on your cameras so that we can have a digital photograph? We have a very efficient team in the secretariat. Supriya, Deepa, Lakshmi, Oindrila, they double up as digital photographers. They have learned this wonderful skill over the last 10 months that we have been doing all these webinars on the BMA digital platform. Get ready. May I request you to put on your videos? I can see so many people who've already done that. And over to the team to complete taking this group photograph. I'd like to also thank everybody who's made the time from all over different parts of the country. As I said, a record number of 136 participants. While you keep smiling, may I tell you that this Friday, we have an unusually interesting session on hyper navigating in this complex world. And this is being done by a renowned trainer by name Bosco. And please check up the website, check up your internal emails. All the details have been given there. And come next Wednesday, we have another very interesting session by the Managing Director of GE Healthcare in India, Shravan Subramaniam, who was still recently with Roche and now has recently moved on to GE Healthcare. He's going to educate us about digital health. These are the two programs you should expect over the next 2 weeks. And of course, coming in the month of March is our conclave on entrepreneurship, a conclave on young achievers, and yet another conclave on kindness. So look forward to some of these in the month of March. Details will soon go up on the website. Please be digitally patient. We have 5 screens to cover, and our digital team is trying to capture everybody's smile. So keep smiling for the time being while we capture your smile.
Little painful, but please do it.
All right, I have a thumbs up from them that they have completed the task of capturing all smiles. Thank you, Ramana sir. It was indeed a pleasure to listen to you in a different format, in a different avatar, and in a different platform. Look forward to continue the learning journey with you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good evening and God bless.
Shubhratri. Thank you, sir.